The railroad, a historic technology that has impacted society, individuals, and the world. The railroad has been used for many purposes through history, mainly to transport people and goods. The first steam-powered locomotive debuted in 1813. This locomotive was invented by a man named George Stephenson. Locomotives have progressed a lot since 1813, now being able to carry loads over 10,000 tons at the speeds of up to 50 miles per hour. During the Civil War, trains would be responsible for getting troops and other supplies to the battlefront. This required the railroad to be very fast, speed being a major factor during the war. The generals of both armies always needed new supplies and rested troops, something that the railroad could easily provide. Since the troops didn't have to march long distances while riding the railroad, they were well rested and ready for the battle in a shorter amount of time, marching sometimes taking up to months longer than travel by rail. The railroad was also able to transport goods such as food and clothing from factories to the battlefront. There was a constant need for new clothes and food, because the armies would always wreck their old clothes and be hungry, needing food for their stomachs. The rail lines provided quick replenishments of these objects, keeping soldiers alive. Though the railroad was present in both armies, it was grasped by the North more than it was the South, allowing the North to better equip their armies with troops and supplies. The North occupied over two-thirds of the railroad, or 24,000 miles of track, compared to the South's one-third and 9,000 miles of track. Since the railroad was so useful, the enemy's armies had to detour the locomotives by dismantling the track, disabling that section of the rail line. This was a great offensive strategy, easily detouring the enemy, but when inflicted on oneself, it was catastrophic. This dismantling called for a new tactic, which was the idea of arming flatbeds and boxcars with large and small artillery to defend the rail lines they owned. Troops would patrol up and down the track, making sure enemies were keeping their distance and not trying to deconstruct the friendly track. Since these patrols were out and watching the track, the rail lines were back and transporting the goods at the rapid pace that they were supposed to. Although moving at this rapid pace for many years in a row, parts began to break and come out of day-to-day rotations. The armies wouldn't be using these abandoned cars and parts, so they had new ideas for what they would be used for. Ideas included setting the cars on fire and sending them down the tracks, such as a ticking time bomb. So when it explodes, it destroys everything around the enemy. In some instances, landmines would be laid across some parts of the enemy's tracks. When hit, these landmines would send the locomotives and rail cars feet off the ground and then off the tracks. All in all, the railroad was a key part of the Civil War, both helping and hurting the armies, but nonetheless, it was a very influential part of the Civil War.